All right, today I want to run you through the Poseidon X Ambition a little bit, which is a extremely low budget gravel bike, but is extremely capable at the same time. And I think it's a good option for a lot of people. So first of all, my background with bikes is mostly in the realm of mountain bikes and also commuter bikes. So this whole gravel road bike world is not very familiar to me, but I have ridden a lot of bikes. So I feel like I have a pretty good idea on general performance of bikes. So the initial reason I picked up this bike was for bike packing, because I want to get into that adventure sport a little bit. It sounds fun and intriguing, and I actually went on my first adventure the other day. And I also wanted to pick up this bike for maybe a little bit of gravel riding, but also just for commuting, getting around, having a nice quick bike that can take you places. So that's what I came into this looking for. And also in terms of pricing, when I picked up this bike, it was on sale for $100 off, and it also had another discount code for another $100 off. So I got this bike new for $700, which is insane. But right now they're selling for $899, which is still a really good price, but they do have sales quite frequently, so I would look for those if you're actually looking to purchase this bike. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's look into the actual features of this gravel bike. So from a materials perspective, this bike is mainly aluminum. You can't have anything but aluminum or steel for this price point, and steel is just a bit too heavy, so I'm glad they went with aluminum in this case. But the selling point for me was the fact that the fork on this bike is carbon, and that just greatly reduces the jitter and bumps you get from a fully rigid aluminum frame. And even though this bike still does have quite a bit of bumpy behavior when it's pumped up in those tires, it's a lot better than it would have been. So I really appreciate having that carbon fork, and that was a really big selling point for me. Poseidon lists the weight of this bike at around 25 pounds, but that's usually for a medium. And so with this extra large, I'm guessing it's somewhere around 26, 27 pounds, which isn't super light by any means, but it is light enough to feel snappy and quick and not like you're having a giant burden of weight. The geometry on this bike is like a gravel bike, so it's more upright and more comfortable for longer riding, and you're less scrunched down like you would be on a road bike, and it is a little bit more upright than the previous Poseidon X, which had a more road bike-like geometry. So I think it's pretty comfy. You can easily use it for commuting, and you don't feel like you're getting into that super aggressive road bike position. All right, so now let's talk the components on this bike, which are definitely budget, but they're still effective. So the shifting on this bike is Advent X by Microshift, and I've had some bikes with Microshift in the past, and I was not a big fan of the shifting, but on this bike, it's actually really snappy, quick, and accurate, and I think that has to do with the fact that there's only one chainring in the front, so it's a 1x10 system, and that just makes it a lot more precise and more of a simple system for shifting. You don't have to worry about changing the front chainring and the back, it's just one shifter. But because the cassette is only a 1x10 on this bike, you might be wondering if it covers enough range, and I think for most things it does. So in the front, the chainring is a 38, and in the back, the cassette is an 11 to 48 10 speed, so that gives you enough range for most hills and also enough on the high end to go pretty quick. Not super fast, but you can go pretty quick. The next big component on this bike I want to talk about are the brakes, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm going to be honest here. The brakes are Tektro mechanical, and mechanical brakes they aren't the same. They're definitely better than rim brakes, but they just don't have that bite that you find with hydraulic brakes, and it makes it a little bit scary in certain circumstances. If you're going down a steep hill or with loose gravel, just the stopping distance is not as good as I would hope it would be. And yeah, just never love these brakes, and that's something that's definitely worth upgrading. I think they do have an option on their website where you can get that upgrade. I mean, again, for the price of the bike, you really can't go wrong, and the brakes do in fact work, but it's just not as responsive as I might hope it would be. The wheels on this bike are 700C, so super standard sizing, and it comes with 40mm tires, but more on that a little bit later. This bike also has an insane amount of mounting points, so you just have places to put bottle cages everywhere. So 2 on the fork, 4 on the frame, I think, and then you can throw a rack on the back. So just a ton of buildability, growability, expandability. So just a ton of room to expand and throw more stuff on your bike, because who doesn't want to rig that thing out? And just a little reference on sizing, I'm 6 feet tall, and I picked up the extra large version of this bike, and it was a little bit confusing on their website to figure out the exact size I needed. So I took a gamble on the extra large, and I think it fits really well. I probably could have fit on a large, but I usually like to scale up my bike sizes just a little bit. It's more comfortable, so that's kind of what I found in terms of sizing. Now let's talk a little bit about the modifications I made to this bike, because although it is pretty good out of the box, there's a few things that can make it better. The first thing I changed on this bike were the tires. And like I mentioned earlier, the bike comes with 40mm tires, which are pretty decent, but for gravel riding, they're a bit narrow. So I wanted something a little bit wider. And another reason I changed the tires on this bike is because they aren't tubeless. And on my very first ride, I got 2 flats. And I just think it's ridiculous to sell any bike that isn't tubeless ready, and this is one of those bikes. Personally, I think everyone should make their bike tubeless. It's just better in every way. So that's just what I think. So technically these rims aren't tubeless ready, and I learned the hard way that the tires aren't tubeless compatible at all, so don't try that. But by putting lots of rim tape in the rims, I was able to make it tubeless with new tires, and so I ended up getting some 43mm tires on this bike, and they only recommend up to 42mm, so 43 is definitely pushing it. There's very little room and gap in between the tire and the frame, but I think it's worth having that bigger size. It just makes it a lot more usable off-road, and having tubeless tires is just absolutely essential. I'll say it again. This is a super minor upgrade, but I also swapped out the pedals for some clipless pedals, just makes it a lot easier riding around, and I also added a rack on the back so I can throw on some panniers or strap things to the bike. So those are the only upgrades I have on right now. There's lots of other things you can change and customize for this cheap bike, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with the bike as it is right now. So just to cut to the point, I really don't think you can go wrong with this bike, especially for the price. Like if you get it at $700 or even $900, it's still a steal. There's nothing else in this price point, in this category of bikes, that has this type of quality. And so if you're looking for those things, there's no other option, and this is a really good bike. This bike rides good, it's comfortable, it's quick enough, it has good shifting, decent enough components, and it'll get you places, and you'll have a lot of fun on it. So I think it's worth checking out if you're into bike packing, gravel riding, or just commuting. It's a fun bike. So anyway, that was just a quick look at the Poseidon X Ambition, which is a great bike at an even better price. So yeah, I'll see you guys next time.